Hello, colleagues, and welcome to our Nature Dialogues. I'm really excited to continue this journey with you. As you may know, this is Martin Cadena, and I'm the community manager for our environment signature solution, and I will be your moderator today. As you know, the dialogues are intended to be a co-creation platform to accelerate global environmental action at scale. In this space, we will focus on nature for water security, but I will not say more as our speakers will dive into these objectives. And just to warm up, I would like to invite you to please introduce yourself in the chat box and maybe highlighting how you have experienced nature through water recently. For example, camping by a lake, having some river activities, etc. And just before I give the floor to our first speaker, the usual housekeeping items. First, please enter your questions in advance using the chat box. The second is that you will find the recording and the presentation later today on our Spark Blue site, and we will enter the link to that site in a minute. And the third is to please make your voice heard by one, participating in a quiz. We have a little game for you in the Q&A space and in the survey at the end of the session. And with that, let's get all started. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to our Nature Hub Director, Midori Paxton, who will get us all excited about nature, about water, and the dialogues as a co-creation platform. So Midori, the floor is all yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Martin, and good morning, afternoon, and good evening, colleagues. I'm delighted to see you all at our second Nature Dialogue session, which is on nature for water security. Water is essentially nature, and water is a liquid gold, our lifeline. And reliable, safe, and secure access to clean water depends on healthy ecosystems through the global water cycle. The water cycle sustains all life on land, but humans have shifted this cycle by destroying nature, cutting down forests, damming rivers, draining wetlands, paving over land, and creating grasslands. So in doing so, we have changed the very ecosystem that depend on this water cycle. 80% of climate change impacts are water-related. Too much water in many places and not nearly enough in others. And disruptions in rainfall patterns and so many extreme weather events. People suffer because we have broken nature's ability to regulate climate, water provision, and distribution. But we have the potential to fix this. I think that's why we are all here. We have the opportunities to restore ecosystems, to repair the global water cycle if we act quickly. And this action is an important part of the UNDP's Nature Pledge, bringing the whole of UNDP approach to accelerate and upscale our support to 140 countries to safeguard the biodiversity and ecosystem services, the very foundation of our life. We all know that water is essential for our economies and for all of us, and that access to water is the single most effective poverty interventions as well. Yet, we are seeing many cities and towns running out of water, and by 2030, our demand for water will exceed supply by 40%, and by 2050, 1 in 5 countries will face water insecurity. So nature is the key to address this freshwater crisis. We need to restore and protect the wetlands, forests, and watersheds that naturally filter pollutants, regulate water cycle, and recharge groundwater. In the arid environment, especially, this groundwater resource is really important. Communities that integrate nature-based solutions are empowered to mitigate the impacts of climate change, reduce vulnerability to drought, and secure sustainable supply of clean water. So these efforts need to be scaled up for much greater impact, and we have no time to lose, and we have an important role to play. So today's dialogue builds on our Nature for Water Security Action Kit, which is now available for all of you to use. Maybe Martin can drop the link to the action kit when she has time. This dialogue is a platform for all of us to build long-term collaboration and strengthen our UNDP water community. This community is already big, right? Because with related projects in over 100 countries, UNDP has the largest water portfolio within the UN system, at least, and UNDP has been playing a critical active role in global and regional UN coordination fora on water, or intergovernmental fora around water as well. And our work and demand for our support in this field is increasingly constantly. We get requests almost daily from different parts of the world. So today's dialogue is a place to share challenges, opportunities towards implementing development solutions for water security that integrate and accurately account for nature's value. So in the next 80 minutes or so, I'm hoping to learn about our innovations for water and hear action-oriented conversations on how to accelerate our support for management and enhancement of water resources. So I look forward to a vibrant and inspirational session, and particularly thank and welcome our speakers for their tremendous support in sharing their insights and shaping this dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Midori, for the inspiring and encouraging words. And now, to dive deeper into Nature for Water Security, we have Adnan Awad with us. Adnan is our head of Water and Oceans Program. So dear Adnan, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you, Midori. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for being here today, wherever you're coming from, morning, afternoon, or evening. It's a very important conversation that we're having today, and I'm really looking forward to it myself. Really to investigate the role of the Nature Pledge as a key contributor to the realization of the global water security goals that we have. First of all, I think it's important to look at what do we mean when we use the term water security. Water security is defined. It's defined by UN Water, the Association of UN agencies and bodies working on water issues, as the capacity of a population to safeguard sustainable access to adequate quantities of acceptable quality water for sustaining livelihoods, human well-being, and socioeconomic development, for ensuring protection against waterborne pollution and water-related disasters, and for preserving ecosystems in a climate of peace and political stability. So we're discussing a subject that captures both the reality of water insecurity due to water scarcity and due to pollution loads that make water unsuitable to use, but also the challenge of preserving ecosystems that feed contested access to water and can become a challenge to political stability within and between countries, where water insecurity itself poses a threat to peace. Together, excuse me. Together, we consider this the Water for Development Challenge, and it comprises three pillars. First of all, water for nature, which acknowledges the symbiotic relationship between healthy ecosystems and the global water cycle. We want to ensure that ecosystems are at the heart of sustainable development. This relies on restoring natural ecosystems and preserving critical biodiversity globally. Nature-based solutions for water can play a major role in ensuring that land, water, and marine ecosystems are protected from pollution restored and sustainably used. Secondly, we focus on water for climate resilience, acknowledging that for most people, water-related events are how climate change impacts are most directly felt. Our work will continue to support countries' efforts to mitigate and adapt to climate change, including flood and drought management. Even the extreme heat gripping the Northern Hemisphere is taking its toll on water. So by better managing water resources through nature, we can help cool the planet. And third is water for peace and security. Because competition over water in damaged ecosystems creates conflict from source to sea. Conversely, cooperation around shared water management, building integrated multi-stakeholder cooperation among water users at local, regional, and transboundary levels can foster peace and security and heal ecosystems stressed by water conflict. Sustainable Development Goal 6 is the primary water SDG. But as Midori remarked just now, and as we'll see through the dialogue, water is a key element for realizing every SDG. Equally important, water is the thread that links the 3 Rio Conventions. With the COPs this year fast approaching for biodiversity and ecosystems, for climate change, and for the desertification conventions, it's increasingly clear that governments are situating water issues at the heart of their sustainable development policies. Water management is no longer only under ministries of environment, but now concerns ministries of planning, economics, foreign affairs, industry, health, housing, and urban development. And we at UNDP must ensure that our approach to the challenge of global water security is ambitious, cohesive, and reflects the full scope of UNDP's extensive global water portfolio, including that which is outside of the Nature Hub. Let me share a few numbers about this real quick. Just about the scale of the water portfolio worldwide, because these figures attest to how cross-cutting the issue of water security actually is. We did a search through the UNDP database for all water-focused projects. So projects with at least 50% of their components that have water at the center between the period of 2018 and 2022 for 5 years. And based on the initial figures, found that globally, we can say that for that 5-year period, there were 501 water-focused projects across 157 countries and across all 17 SDGs. So Mary will have more details on this in a few minutes, but I think it's really a remarkable finding. This shows how the reach of the Nature for Development Hub extends across UNDP's work as water dependent on nature and protecting healthy ecosystems is key to much of the work we do globally. Since 2022, demand from governments to regional hubs and country offices for support on water issues continues to grow. We have to be ready to respond to that. The Nature Pledge empowers us to improve global water security by supporting systemic shifts in how water is valued, financed, and managed by governments and the communities they represent. We're proud to introduce the work of the water team today that's aimed at taking the Nature Pledge to the country offices and the governments that they serve in an on-the-ground application under development, which will be part of the Nature for Water Security Action Toolkit. So thank you for being part of this community, and I also look forward to hearing more as we dive into today's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Midori and Adnan for setting the stage. And now, just to finalize this intro part, I would like to encourage you all to take part in a 5-minute competition. So we're going to have a small quiz. Just let me manage to share my screen right now. And you will find a link into the chat box. You either can click on the link or scan the QR code and enter your name or pseudonym. And then the next task is to select your educated guess response. You will have 20 seconds to do that. So if we're ready, let's get this started. All right, let me just wait 5 more seconds so all players are ready. let's go. Question number 1. How many people still lack access to safe drinking water? Options: 1.2 billion, 2.2, 3.5, or 4 billion people. All right, there you have. Now, let me tell you why the 2.2 billion is the correct answer. The 2020 SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework found that progress on SDG 6 water goal is alarmingly off track. Today, 2.2 billion people, about 1/4 of the global population, still lack access to safe water. Global water demand is projected to increase by 55% by 2050. A 40% water deficit is projected by 2030, and water-related losses could reduce GDP by as much as 6% in some regions by 2050. Question number 2. By 2050, how many people are projected to face at least 1 month of water insecurity each year? Make your educated guess between 2 billion people and 5 billion people. And I will let you know in some seconds. All right. So let me walk you through the answer. Currently, 3.5 billion people around the world experience water shortages lasting at least 1 month each year. According to the State of Global Water Resources published in November 2022 by the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, this number is projected to rise to 5 billion people facing such shortages by 2050. Now, not all things are depressing. Question number 3. What is your educated guess about the return of investment in co-benefits for restoring forests and wetlands to improve water security? And you have options from $5 for every dollar invested to between $20 and $30 for every single dollar invested. All right. So let's go to the answer. The report, The Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity, found that the return of investment for co-benefits of land restoration averages from more than $20 for every $1 invested, and a recent WRI study estimated value in co-benefits to be as high as $30 for every dollar invested in ecosystems restoration. Thanks for participating, and it's a tie with the people you're looking at the screen. Thank you for being willing to play with us today. Now, let's get to the second part of this journey. And we will dive deep now into nature for water security. And for that, we have with us Mary Matthews, who is our water lead at Intermin, and the UNDP Ocean Advisors and Ocean Innovation Challenge Manager. After this, we will get inspired by integrated work on the ground with Margaret Jones, Deputy Resident Representative from our UNDP office in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Asim Salah, our Senior Program Associate, the same country office, Mohamed Bayoumi, our Environment Specialist in UNDP Egypt, and Tan Sengalama, our Team Leader for Energy and Environment in UNDP Uganda. So let's discuss nature for water security. Mary, the floor is yours. Just give me 3 seconds to get the presentation on your screen, and you will have 15 minutes to frame the conversation, and then around 40 minutes to moderate the panel. Over to you.
Oh, all right. Thank you so much, Martin, and for everybody who did so well on the quiz. We'll be following up with you to get you to be sure to join our water team, because across UNDP, we are working on water everywhere. And thank you also very much to Midori and Adnan for your opening remarks, and thanks to everyone for being here today, because if any of you have had a conversation with me, you know that I'm very enthusiastic about water, and especially about the work that we do in UNDP on water, and especially as that pertains to the very important relationship between nature and water security. Next slide, please. I think everyone is familiar with this graphic, which really does show that water is an essential element for nature for development. If we look at this, and this was put together by the Stockholm Environment Institute, it really emphasizes that the SDGs 15, 14, 6, and 13, which are nature, which is the core of the Nature Hub, are really the ones that enable society to function well with all the SDGs on social issues, and that then enables the economy to function. And without nature at the core and out the foundation, that doesn't work. Water, in terms of being a key element for development, is also absolutely necessary for all life, including all life on land, all life in the water, and below water. And with 80% of the impacts of climate change, we can't talk about climate change without also talking about water. Next slide, please. The Global Commission on the Economics of Water, which is a group of very high-level political, academic, and economists, as well as scientists, have really come together, and they've been working very hard. And one of the things they came out with last year, launched at the UN 2023 Water Conference, was a report that basically says we have broken the global water cycle by deforestation, by mismanagement of our water resources for decades. We've now broken that cycle. Moving on to the next slide. And if we look at the impacts of water and rainfall projection or runoff model projections for the period of 2090 to 2099 relative to 100 years before, we can see that there really are some very, very drastic changes, especially in areas of the Middle East and North Africa, across Europe, across parts of Latin America, and the United States, and even into Australia. But it's not just the decline in precipitation that we're facing, it's also the massive upheaval in much more precipitation that's also going to be problematic, largely due to large storms and storm fronts. When we look at that compared to biodiversity intactness, we can see there really are a lot of very similar correlations, especially if we're looking at Southern Africa, at Southern Latin America, and again, the Middle East, Central Asia, and North America. We're seeing this happening across the board. It's the mismanagement of the ecosystems in large part that's pushed the global water cycle out of balance, that humans are actually doing this. And as we're seeing climate change impacts increasing, we're also seeing we're in a very negative cycle where we're seeing global warming leading also to the loss of biodiversity, and the loss of biodiversity then also impacting precipitation, which then ends up resulting in more losses. And it's going to make the future for all of us much more difficult. Next slide, please. If we look at the challenges that we're facing as a result of this, we know that we are facing a three-headed global water crisis, that we are in fact terribly water insecure. We are failing to meet human demands for water. We've definitely seen that global environmental change is causing a rising frequency and severity and water-related extreme episodes, both with severe flooding and severe droughts, and these are becoming much more impactful on our development. And we're also seeing humans are now actually shifting the global hydrological cycle to the extent that the source of all fresh water, precipitation, and global water security is seriously under threat. Next slide, please. As we're going into the COPs, we're aware that if we fail on climate change, we will fail on climate change if we fail on water. In addition to that, the losses in biodiversity and ecosystem will be much more severe. And of course, you cannot combat desertification and droughts without taking into the idea that we absolutely have to have water resource managed better than we have been. In just a minute, I'll show you some of the work that we're doing in UNDP as it relates to the SDGs, but all of the SDGs absolutely depend on reliable access to clean, safe, reliably timed water. The good news is, people, we can break this cycle. We have shown across UNDP where we're starting to make really big adjustments. And if we can scale and replicate these, we can do it even more and much faster. We do have the ability to do this. Next slide, please. Within UNDP, within the Nature Hub, we're working on an integrated water resource management plan as part of the emergent global water services offer. This will be linked to the regional water offers as well. A number of our regional hubs are now developing water offers specific to the needs, because the water security challenges that are faced in the RBAS region are not the same as they are as in RBAC, for example, where in Latin America and Asia, water quality is often a very significant issue and the leading threat. In other places, especially parts of North Africa, the Middle East, some parts of Southern Europe and Central Asia, we're seeing access to water and severe drought is also a really serious issue. Very, very quickly, we've got the 3 pillars that Adnan had described, and unfortunately, it looks like it's getting a little bit cut off here, but we've got the water for nature, ensuring healthy ecosystems at the heart of development, especially with nature-based solutions, because after all, Mother Nature is our very best water engineer, and we have a lot to learn there. We've got water for resilience, not just to resilience from climate change, but also maldevelopment, where we're not taking into effect the impacts that we're having on our ecosystems and needing to be sure that we're building resilient ecosystems across the board, especially around flood and drought management with innovative technologies. And then, as we've mentioned, water for peace and security, because it's been said, actually in the previous century, that in the last century, wars were fought over oil, and this century, they will be fought over water. So far, we have not seen water directly at the heart, but we see it coming very, very close, and some very concerning trends in that. UNDP is doing some excellent work supporting water for peace and security, and we've got some great potential to do even more. Let's go ahead and move into the next slide, because really one of the most important things is tying this into the work of the Nature Pledge. There we are. And within that, we've got 3 areas that we're working in. And I'm sure everyone here, or I hope everyone here, is familiar with the Nature Pledge, with the value shifts, the economic and finance shifts, and the policy and practice shifts. Within the water services offer, we're focusing on the narratives and behavior change with capacity development and awareness raising, and innovation for water management and nature-based solutions under the value shift. Under the economic and finance shift, we're focusing on accounting for nature and shifting financial flows, perhaps developing an aquafin modeled on biofin, the critical need for economic valuation of water services across sectors to help government ministries across the ministries talk to each other, because often the way the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Municipal Water Resources or Housing talk about water is not in the same language, but they do all speak the same language around budgets, and that's a helpful way to do it. And more, we're seeing the need for helping to create enabling environments in many of our countries to support investment by the private sector as well as the public sector. In the policy and practice shifts, we've got institutions and governance, where institutions are an integrator, and UNDP, by working across all of the SDGs and across all of the ministries within our country offices, is really uniquely positioned to do a great job of integrating and building integrated water resources management and supporting the data and information management, often through economic modeling and other modeling for integrated water resources management. Next slide, please. All righty. UNDP, as we've mentioned, is a global leader. In exploring the Power BI database, we have found that not only do we have water projects in nature, we have water projects in energy, waste, crisis, governance, gender, health, inclusive growth, circular economy, pretty much across everywhere. And I'll show you a really neat graphic we've got on that in just a minute. UNDP, as Midori mentioned, is playing a very active role in UN Water, because there is no global convention on water. UN Water brings together all the senior program managers across all of the 36 UN organizations working on water. And UNDP is chairing the Innovation Task Force and the Country Engagement Task Force, as well as serving on UN Water's global, what are we calling it? Our global governance group, which is about 5 of us that oversee and provide direction to UN Water. We have found that not only are we supported by vertical funds, we've also got a lot of support from national donors, from IFIs and others, and the private sector is more and more interested in collaborating with UNDP on water. For example, IBM, Danone, and Secom are 3 companies that we have been in discussions with through Patricia Purcell, but also otherwise. So it's neat to see that starting to develop. Next slide, please. We're very happy today to be launching the Nature for Water Security Action Kit. And my great thanks to the team in the Nature Hub for really doing some great work helping to source this. And this is a living document, as I understand, so we'll be updating that. And we're very excited about this today. So thank you all for this, and this is available online with a lot of very good information that can be very helpful to our country offices, especially in talking to our partners about water and about the importance of water security in the work we do. If we go to the next slide, please. One of the questions we have is, what is UNDP doing about this? We've mentioned the different SDG mapping exercise that we've done. This is the water-focused projects in UNDP, and we harvested this first with a very reliable consultant, followed by working with the Chief Digital Office's AI team to go through the database and find, of all the projects, those that are water focused, meaning over 50% of the components are focused on water. Between 2018 and 2022. There are 501 water-focused projects in that time frame. And I'd like to note, unfortunately, we were not able to use the Accelerator Lab and the small grants projects because of some issues with the way those were in the database, but we do want to add those to these because we know there's some great work that's being done. The water-focused projects across the SDG really does show where UNDP is working. And I have to say that as we've looked at these, our team has been really surprised that not only are these, of course, focused on SDG 6 and very strongly correlated with SDG 13 on climate change, but we're seeing the poverty, we're seeing health and education, we're seeing urbanization, clean, sustainable cities and communities. Of course, we're expecting to see life on land, but also the Partnership for Goals coming up in terms of the numbers. If we go to the next slide, we can actually look at the budgets, which are totaled for water-focused projects at $2.8 billion over that period. And again, we're seeing very similar trends where the number of projects and the budgets of these water-focused projects are really showing that we are addressing these SDGs through our work on water in UNDP. And we're happy to discuss this more as we're going. One quick point to make here is certainly because the budget is $2.8 billion for this time period, there are projects that are focusing on poverty reduction and climate change and SDG 6 and so forth. So these are not individually tagged, they're tagged across the lines. Next, please. All righty. We're not just doing this to do an interesting mapping of this, although honestly, it's been really interesting to do this. We had the idea that to help activate the Nature Pledge, we really wanted to try something that would be useful to our country offices, which is the Water Solutions Catalog. And the Water Solutions Catalog, for those of you who are familiar with the Panorama database for ecosystem projects, is a cross between, what we like to say, a cross between the Panorama and Amazon.com. It is allowing us to capture and replicate the best practices and the lessons learned from projects across the water portfolio within UNDP. And what we have here is a mock-up of what this is going to look like. So initially, a country office and a government counterpart can go through an initial decision tree based on the geography, the climate features, the socioeconomic variables, and the desired outcomes. With the, and once those are entered in, based on AI selection, the suggestions will be produced specifically for the conditions that were initially in the decision tree. So it's not just one project, it's a set of projects that then can be reviewed and adapted specific to the area where it's being implemented. Next slide, please. So for each of the individual solutions, there'll be an introduction on the specific solution, just a quick overview, the key lessons learned for replication, because we want solutions that are not only replicable, but transformative, that are scalable, that can actually work from case to case to case. But of course, there will always be important lessons learned, and you cannot just simply template one project in one country to work in another country. And so what we'll be doing is adapting these to really make sure the lessons learned show what is needed to be able to replicate these. We'll then have the another slide, sorry, stay on this slide. Another window that will come up that has the stages and project documents with terms of reference and so forth that are needed to implement the project. Now we want to be careful not to template these. So if you go to the next slide, please. We have a summary PDF of the concept that can be replicated and adapted. Very importantly, and I can't stress this enough, we don't advocate taking a project and just automatically taking it from one place to another. For example, something in Kazakhstan's transition to green economy might work in Uzbekistan, but it may not work in Costa Rica as well. And so what we've got to be careful that we do is that we note what kind of changes need to be made. And this will include in this PDF key search terms for the experts roster, the global, the GPM experts roster, to draw on the expertise of someone who can come in and help adapt the concept to the new country. It will also have the time frame, the budget, and potential partners and donors for each sub-project. Working together, these will then be able to inform the development of a much broader water program for country offices. And I do have to say, when I've had the joy of explaining this concept in country offices, when I've been on missions, I have gotten a lot of very positive feedback, including one deputy resident representative who said, "Mary, I need this tomorrow. Can you please get this to me now?" Because there's obviously a growing need for countries to be able to respond well and to learn from the work that we're doing across our network. Next slide, please. All right. So one last quick thing. Thanks, Martin. We are planning on launching the Water Solutions Catalog at the CCD COP in December, and we certainly look forward to everyone's inputs as we are going through the final drafts of this, because it is a group project. There's no way that any of us should think we're doing this by ourselves. And I'm very happy and very proud to get to work with everyone on the team on this. So please stay tuned, and we're looking forward to more. Martin, back over to you.
Thank you, Mary. And please stay on the stage. Little by little, I'm going to add our fabulous speakers so we can dive right into a panel. And I know you have some questions for them. So just bear with me as I am just starting to add our speakers. So if our speakers can just turn their videos on, so I can be able to add them. All right.
Hey, Margaret. All right, and we've got Asim with us. And
Yes.
hello, Dr. Bayoumi. I'm glad you got out of traffic. Very well done. In Cairo, great. And is Tom able to join us? Was he able to, oops, we've lost Dr. Bayoumi. Martin, why don't I go ahead and ask Margaret and Asim to get started on, and we can bring others in as we're able to get them brought in. Does that work for you?
Please proceed. Yes.
All right. All right. Everybody, I'm very, very pleased to introduce or to be joined by Margaret Jones-Williams, who is the Deputy Res Rep in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia Country Office, and Asim Salah, who is also from the country office there, who is in charge of the environment programs. There's been some amazing work done in Saudi Arabia on water, and I'd really like to first ask Margaret to talk about the water security issues in Saudi Arabia, and then Asim to talk about how UNDP has been helping address those.
Excellent.
Margaret, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mary. And thank you to everybody. And thanks, Midori and Adnan, for those remarks. And Mary, that excellent presentation. And Martin, thank you again for ensuring that Saudi Arabia country office is in this dialogue. Very much appreciated. I just wanted to give a few points really to set the stage for the importance of this issue for Saudi Arabia. Recent data shows that of the top 20 driest countries in the world, 14 of them are in this region, in the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa. And based on annual precipitation, apparently, I actually just got these facts yesterday, Saudi Arabia is actually listed as the third driest country in the world. And Mary, you can help me to verify that. And with a population of approximately 36 million people, with an annual average rainfall of just about 59 millimeters per year, it is clear that water security must be a priority for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And the statistics also show that Saudi Arabia is one of only 17 countries that does not have any permanent surface water. No permanent rivers here. There are dry riverbeds that when there are pockets of rainfall, they will have some water, but they are not permanent. And there are only 17 countries, I understand, in that category. So this is really very clear. And Saudi Arabia depends on desalination for potable water supply. So I just wanted to set the stage for the importance of the water security issues in this country. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Asim to give more information on the details of our partnerships here and the work that we're doing to support addressing this issue. Asim, over to you.
Yes. Yes, can you hear me, right? Okay. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mary. Really, we're looking forward to receive and launching of the water catalog solutions. That will be definitely help us a lot more in the country offices at the level of the country offices. Anyway, thank you for giving us this opportunity to discuss and shed some light on the UNDP water journey in Saudi Arabia. Before I go into dive deep into this journey, it's very important to highlight that the governance of the water sector in Saudi Arabia has undoubtedly contributed to the improving of the connections between climate, water, food, and energy society nexus, because recently they composed the three different sectors agriculture, environment, and water under the same umbrella of ministry, and they call it the Ministry of Environment, Water, and Agriculture, to be simplified as MIWA. This definitely will pave the road for Saudi Arabia to apply the approach of the nexus between the three different, or at least 5 sectors. However, in UNDP in Saudi Arabia, we started in the water sector since 2004. That was the first UNDP engagement with the KSA government to provide technical assistance in water sectors. And then UNDP at that time, in partnership with the World Bank and the Ministry of Water and Electricity, at that time, it was just water and electricity. We managed to develop retrospective groundwater abstractions, estimated and mapping across the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So for that time, in order to provide the policymaker with a decision between water security versus food security. So the policy at that time made to discourage the domestic wheat production. So the balance went more into water security rather than the food security. And that has been done by the assistance of UNDP. Again, in our journey in 2008, UNDP assisted the Ministry of Water and Electricity, still, in adopting an integrated approach for sustainable management of its water sector, shifting from its traditional supply management policy to a multi-sector demand management approach. So in 2008, we tried to build the base of the integrated water resources management for the water sector. Of course, coming again in 2012, we're trying to use the satellite to survey the irrigation water. So we try to introduce the digitalization in the water sector as well. In 2018, here is actually the breakthrough, let's say, because we assisted with MIWA, the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Environment, Water and Agriculture, to develop the national water strategy. So we moved, in 2018, we moved from planning and action plan into a more dynamic sort of a strategy. So we produced the first national water strategy with more focus on implementing the integrated water information system, integrated groundwater modelings into 3-dimensional model, and making necessary updates. So I think that 2018 was really the breakthrough in the water sector and the success story of the water sector in Saudi Arabia by doing the national water strategy. The main importance of this national water strategy focus on improving the use of water resources. And also, of course, this is including improvement of irrigation practices, reducing feed cultivations, of course, launching the study of assets, the possibility of collecting, treating, and reusing of wastewater as well. Now, in 2023, we also engage again with MIWA to supporting self-sufficiency in water management and developing technical methodologies in the process of managing data and information system related to water. And this is also, again, enhance the approach, the approach of integrated water resources management. However, the way forward from now, and as Margaret mentioned that now we are heading toward the COP16, we are trying with the government here in Saudi Arabia to put the water at the heart of the COP16 by doing that in the both green and blue zone, hopefully for that. Again, we're going also to shed the light of the importance of women in water sector and empowerment of women in water sectors. So we're going to do that also with our partner in MIWA through the IWRM project that we are having. In matter of fact, I need to mention that one of the largest funding program is for the water sector here at the level of the Saudi Arabia country office.
Great.
Yeah.
Jim, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I will stop here and then I will open the floor again for Margaret maybe to reflect on that.
Thank you very much, Asim. And I think really just to reflect on that last point in terms of the fact that Saudi Arabia will be hosting this year the UNCCD COP16. So this is a key role for us here in UNDP to support the government and UNCCD on that. And so we are really trying to ensure that we bring water to the heart of the discussion and the deliberations at COP in terms of building resilience to drought, land degradation, and desertification. So, and of course, we've gotten a lot of support and will continue to rely on the Nature Hub and the water team for this. And I know that it was a point that Adnan had also. So thank you, Adnan, for that. Really also just reflecting that water is the link, right, between the three COPs, the biodiversity, climate change, and UNCCD. Over to you, Mary.
Great, thank you so much. And I want to thank you both for helping highlight this. And I have to say, one of the things I really love about my job is learning how different countries deal with water resources management. It's kind of like going to someone's house and opening up all the cabinets and seeing where everything is kept. Because if you go into somebody's kitchen, everybody's got in their kitchen, they've got a place where they keep the pots and pans, and they keep the dry goods, and they keep the plates and the glasses, but they don't all keep them in the same place. And I often refer to the institutional kind of mapping of water across the board to where those actually are. And in Saudi Arabia, I was really excited to see that when I kind of imagined what the perfect kitchen for IWRM, for doing all the things would look like, Saudi Arabia's got a really, really nice setup. But also when it comes to water security and the challenges, I mean, the deputy minister in charge of water directorate there said to me, when it comes to the CCD COP, we are experiencing in Saudi Arabia now what many countries around the world will be looking at in 10, 20, 30 years. And I think we've got a lot to learn and a lot of great exchanges. And as we're looking at, for example, the climate change impacts and how they're impacting the region. By the way, Margaret, the other two more arid countries are Kuwait and Jordan. So, and I think that's probably because that little strip down in southern Saudi Arabia that gets a bit more rain than they do in Kuwait and Jordan. So that would be why they're number 3. But the question of how do we deal with this and how climate change is really impacting nature and the water sector in our countries is really important. And I'm so pleased to have Dr. Bayoumi with us because I know from his extensive experience in Egypt and in the country office in Egypt, he's really had a very firsthand experience with this. Dr. Bayoumi, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And for making it through the Cairo traffic, which can be a challenge all unto itself. Can you tell us how you see the impacts of climate change affecting nature and the water sector around, or the nature around water sector and the water sector around nature in your country? Because I know that you have different challenges. You've got the River Nile, but it doesn't necessarily make water management easier. Can you tell us what you're seeing?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this important webinar. It's my pleasure to be with you. The situation in Egypt actually is not much different from what has been described in Saudi Arabia. The region is really the driest in the world. All this region, I mean, the countries are suffering from lack of water. Talking about water for nature and ecosystem is a luxury in this region because there is no water in the first place. With different, levels of scarcity in the different countries in this region. Most of the countries in this region are below the water level, water poverty level, and the 1,000 meter cube per capita per year. And this means that these countries are not going to be able to be self-sufficient in terms of food production. So the issue of water is actually linked to food security as well. And it happened that Egypt, with the large population that we have in Egypt, it is dependent on importing like 50% or more of its food, in particular grains, from outside, the borders. And this adds another layer of the water management. In Egypt, the per capita share of water in Egypt is around the 500 meter cube per capita per year. Even with the River Nile, which is the only source of water that Egypt have, the rainfall, in Egypt is erratic and is not effective. So the only source of water is the Nile, and obviously the Nile is affected by climate change, and the Nile flood is affected by climate change and man-made structures at the level now that we have, that the per capita share of water per Egyptian is reaching the absolute water poverty level, which is extremely difficult to sustain food production, as I mentioned. So obviously climate change is coming with additional challenge, different aspects impacting water, in addition to the impact of the climate change on the River Nile flow, which is an important element in the story. Climate change is coming actually with a sea level rise that's affecting the most fertile lands in Egypt, the low-lying lands in the Nile Delta, which is subject to coastal flooding as well as seawater intrusion. And this is here where the UNDP is intervening with a large project to protect the low-lying lands in the Nile Delta from coastal flooding. But unfortunately, we cannot prevent, the seawater intrusion, which is leading to an increased salinity of soil salinity, which has its negative impact on the crop yield. And this is the food basket for Egypt that's providing the other 50% that's being produced locally, in addition to the other 50% of food production that's being imported. And obviously, this is another challenge associated with climate change. The increase in temperature with the global warming is going to increase the water demand. And again, this means that you need more water for production of the crops, and you need more water to wash the soil, with the increased salinity in the Nile Delta. And all of this water is not available already. With the increase in the population, again, another challenge add to the decrease in the per capita share of water resources. Climate change is coming with an increased frequency of flash floods in desert areas, which affected the communities over there. And it comes again with extreme weather events, heavy precipitation that happens, in cities and areas that are not prepared to receive this amount of rain. It doesn't mean that this is additional water resources, but it means more casualties and economic losses because of systems that are not designed to absorb this extreme weather events and heavy precipitation. So the situation actually in Egypt in terms of water management is really not in the best situation. let aside, I'm not speaking about our neighbors, but the North African countries, as you mentioned, are facing a big scarcity, and they're dependent more on rain for water, and they have been suffering over the last 5 years out of for droughts, a heavy and strong episode of drought. I've been in Morocco a month ago, and I have seen wheat that was not able to grow actually under the current drought condition for the 5th year in a row. And the solution, khalas, in these countries is no more about water management. You are managing something that's not existent in the first place. You want to increase the efficiency, the water use efficiency, where the water is not available primarily. The conclusion, as we see right now, is moving into alternative water resources. Alternative water resources, we're talking about water reclamation or water desalination. These are the technologies that we have, that can provide the water. UNDP worked 20 years ago in a pioneer project in Egypt. With probably this was the first GF-funded project in Egypt to introduce the technology of engineered wetlands for water reclamation, water treatment, which was successful to a certain extent, but the land use, the land needs of engineered wetlands restricted, the expansion of this technology, which was tested at this stage. Although that's successful, the water was treated successfully, but there was no land, in the Nile Delta to expand, the use of engineered wetland. So we are left over, right now with desalination. Desalination is known to be an energy-intensive technology, with have some environmental concerns surrounding it, and I'm trying to learn, from my other part of the work that I'm doing on climate change mitigation, on the energy sector, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. We have seen, dramatic advancement in the technology related to renewable energy and energy efficiency over the last decade. And in my opinion, working on the other side, as I said, with climate change mitigation, I can see that the solution for water problems, that the water crisis that we have right now, is going to be residing in technology advancement. As I mentioned, Egypt is not able to produce its food with available water. And climate change is adding another dimension that I should have mentioned for outside the borders as well. In Egypt being dependent on import of food from outside, and the main countries that are producing grains, again, these countries are subject to climate change, and the possibility of failure of these crops in outside the borders of Egypt. And this is where the issue of country food security is going to be transferred to a global food security. Sometimes might happen that we have money and we don't have food to buy, because there are failures in the countries that are producing the main food production. And we have an alarming situation with the war in Ukraine and Russia, which is producing big part of the grains, supplying the world. And this was very alarming and caused a big panic in Egypt, that it's not even that I might have the money, but I don't find the food to buy. Solution has to be local to a large extent, or contribute to the solution. And this is where the idea of water reclamation and water desalination came into the picture. Desalination, as I mentioned, is a technology of rich countries. We have witnessed decrease in the prices of desalination over the last few years, but it's not sufficient, to use it for irrigation, which is the key critical issue that we're talking about right now, is water for food. And learning from the experience of climate change mitigation, as I mentioned, with the international community investing a lot for alternative energy solution, for supporting the energy transition, we have seen this significant progress in the technologies that led to the sharp decrease in the prices of these technologies on one hand, and the standardization of the technologies on the other hand. When I hear you, Mary, talking about that there is no solution that is applicable in one country that could be moved to another country, which is very true in what you're saying. But the solution, the end solution for water crisis in this region is going to be for solutions that can be transferred from one part of the world to the other. And learning from the experience, of PV, for instance, big part of the drop in the prices of the PV is that the standardized solution and the plug-and-play systems that can be implemented in any country. And there is a lot to learn actually from this energy sector for the water sector to learn from. I understand that the international community interest over the last decade was mainly focused on climate change mitigation, and the results out of that is beyond the expectation in terms of the technology advancement, as I mentioned, which gives great hope that there's going to be energy transition very close. And I hope that we see similar global programs supporting climate change adaptation, and in particular, alternative water resources that we're talking about, as well as sustainable agriculture system. With this in hand, if we're able to reduce the prices of desalination, take care of the environmental concerns associated with desalination, taking advantage of the renewable energy cheap prices over electricity now that to power desalination plants, I think that this is going to be the solution to use this desalinated water for irrigation. Is this possible? We realized from the research that we have done recently that this is possible, and it's taking place in Spain at a wide scale, and the scale is increasing, and this has been transferred to a country like Morocco, and this gives hope to this region to start to replicate and do the same. I'm sorry for being intervention, but I'm trying to put, the hands on the unconventional solutions that really can resolve the problem of water and food security in this region.
Dr. Bayoumi, thank you so much. And, I think you are one of the great advocates of this approach. And through the many years we've known each other and the conversations, this is one of the reasons I'm so happy to get to work with you and with Asim and with Margaret and everybody, because we're all working together to try to figure this out. And I think one of the things I've been looking at the chat a bit that I think is really important for us to think about is the technology transfer. And I know desalination, especially coming from an environmental perspective, and I will admit that I also know Margaret is a marine biologist as well as being a deputy res rep. And she and I have had a number of conversations about this, as well as with Adnan and a number of others. There really are some pretty serious concerns about, as you said, the energy intensity of desalination and the brine release and the brine impacts. And I know, for example, in Egypt, the brine disposal from, for example, that's done with Israel as well as otherwise, is dumped into the Mediterranean at the outflow of the Nile, and that can make a big difference. Before we go too far down, I don't want to say the rabbit hole of desalination, because you all know I can talk about this and I love trying to figure this out, because there is some amazing work, as you said, about how can we reduce the environmental impacts, reduce the energy demands, and increase the benefits of desalination. Water reuse is also a hugely successful. Wastewater reuse is hugely successful in the Namibian capital of Windhoek. They've been using a closed loop system since the 1960s. And I admit, I drink the water there. What comes out of the tap goes down the drain, goes through treatment, and comes back up. So it's great that we're able to see that. And the nature-based solutions are really wonderful to see. Lake Manzal is a great example, especially now that they've turned that into a training center of excellence. And I know that Saudi Arabia is also very eager to share a lot of the experiences. While we've got time, because I think this is the very beginning of a much longer, very exciting conversation. I don't talk about water without getting excited. because I see it as being so critical to everything. I'd like to ask Boran Mohamed from the Yemen office to join us. He's got a bit of a question about water recovery in delta zones. And I think it would be interesting to have him come in and join us. On a very quick note, Martin, while you're helping set that up, if you can do that, Martin, if you can nod and let me know you can do that.
Yeah, as long as dear Boran opens the camera, I can do that.
Okay, great. And in the meantime, I received a message from Tom Salgama in the country office in Uganda, who was called for an emergency meeting with the Minister of Agriculture. My guess is it might have had something to do with water, as 80% of water withdrawals on the surface are for irrigation and for agriculture. One quick note while we're waiting Boran to join us. So 70 to 80%, depends on where in the world you are, you have the surface water withdrawals being made for agriculture. 35% on average of that water that's withdrawn is lost in the transit system. So we're having a much smaller amount of that water actually getting to the food sources. And then of the water, the food that's grown, we have 40% wastage. So with just a few tweaks to the efficiency, we really could make a big change, but we can't do it just working in water or just working in food. We've got to work in transportation. We've got to work and we've got to integrate it. And that's one of the key things. Boran, are you with us now?
In audio, yes,
I am here.
not in video.
All right. Boran, thanks so much. Can you join us with your intervention on this?
Well, actually, my intervention was about the water scarcity in Delta regions, especially in Yemen. We are having a project now with the KfW, and we are working on it's a catchment. It's a whole watershed, but the districts that we are targeting are placed in Delta region. And obviously, the water influx in that areas is it's very little, very small amount reach to these areas. And one of the districts is very famous with irrigation and agriculture and all these things. And now we are trying to have some solutions for subsurface water storage, because the main wadi, it's famous also with having substantial flash floods, but unfortunately they are not they're not captured anywhere. They're just wasted, or they are the evaporation and also the seepage also affect the quantity, and the water cannot be utilized. But the other thing that we have, the other problem is if we will go for subsurface storage to recharge or to augment the recharge in these areas, we will still have the issue of the illegal drilling. So the success of any solution, especially in the conflict-affected regions like Yemen and in Sudan. I am from Sudan, by the way, and we have similar problems. It's the issue of the governance. As long as we don't have a robust governance system, the IWRM, the water security, and all these solutions, cannot be sustained, because the governance is the overall arching concept for the IWRM. In general, the management of everything is about day-to-day activities, but the governance is to regulate these activities. So whenever we propose a solution, I'm talking basically about the conflict-affected regions, we need to consider the governance. And at that case, the IWRM is not a process, but it's an end result. Because if we will propose solutions or projects I mean, for IWRM, and indicating that the IWRM will be a process. That means we already have a strong institutions, we have regulations, we have the, the laws are enforced and are on place, but that's not the, the situation with countries like Yemen and all the countries that are under conflict now. So IWRM is more like an end process in the projects. And also the other thing that you know, that Yemen is also famous with the terraces, which is the most, it's a natural, it's a heritage, and it is not just a natural based solution, but it's also an indigenous knowledge. It's part of the indigenous knowledge. And unfortunately, even the terraces, we have a problem with the ownership and all these things. And also because the lack of the laws, the regulatory frameworks, there are a lot of challenges. And I hope that if any country that have a similar context, especially in water stress or with solutions to delta regions, it will be very good to be incorporated in the catalog and to share their experience with us, so that we can exchange knowledge and see how can we implement them in Yemen. Thank you.
Bron, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I want to take a quick moment to give my answer, but I think it would be great to also get the thoughts from our other panelists. And we're running a bit short on time, but I think we can do this. So very quickly, with the Water Solutions Catalog, as I've said, we've got to be really careful that we're recommending solutions that make sense and that that work. See, there I go, needing some water right there. But one of the issues is with IWRM, and I was just in meetings in Dushanbe at the Water Dialogues and at World Water Forum before that. IWRM that we often hear about, especially in the last 10 years, 10, 15 years, really is based on a European model. And the problem there is it assumes that countries and governments work on a European model. And we know that's not the case. We know that the stability, the decision-making processes, the resource distribution is often very different in some countries than it is in others. So I really appreciate your thoughts about we've got to make sure it's inclusive. We've got to make sure it's adapted and that it fits the region, including the conflict regions where it's happening. Really interesting work is being done that's showing that where countries have transboundary agreements, when they start to have conflicts, the transboundary agreements around water are actually holding when other conflicts are not working. And the Jeff International Waters projects actually were originally targeted to work in conflict zones, not to necessarily implement a traditional Western IWRM approach, but to get people working together over shared resources. And there's some wonderful opportunities and some great case studies, and I'll be happy to talk with you about it. But I also, in both Saudi Arabia and in Egypt, where governments don't function like they do, honestly, in Western Europe or in the United States, they're able to develop systems where it does work. Asim, if you could give us a quick summary of how it works there. Margaret, if you are able to talk about your experiences either in Jamaica or the Mekong or the Amazon Delta, and then Dr. Bayoumi, if you could give us a quick summary, just what could be transplanted from, this is the trick, transplanted from your case studies to the case study or to Yemen to provide support? Ooh, that was a hard one. And we have about 2 minutes left per person. Who would like to be brave and jump in there?
You can start, Asim.
Okay. What was that? I couldn't quite hear you clearly. You were nominating Asim. Okay, Asim, you've been nominated.
Yes, sure. Actually, Mary and colleagues, all of the previous, if you make some sort of comparison of all the previous study, there is some sort of consensus that we need to rationalize the water demand, especially in agricultural sector.
Yeah.
So I think this is one of the main takeaway from all of our experience here in Saudi Arabia, because I think the agricultural sector consumed more water than other sectors. So there's very important rationalize the water consumption in agriculture. The second thing, I think also it's very important to show the economic benefit of water resources management in Saudi Arabia and in other countries. I think also this is one of the takeaway that we need also to be reflected. I think the third one that I can think of maybe considering could be given to other forthcoming economic opportunities in the water sectors as well, and research. Also, this is very important. It's very important to have some sort of research and development centers along with the water sectors.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, we've got 1 minute each for Margaret and for Mohamed. This is what you get, Mohamed, for nominating Asim. Margaret, very quickly, because we need to make sure Penny has her 5 minutes for the next upcoming one. Yes, over to you.
Absolutely. And just a couple of points, because Mary, yes, I have worked in the Amazon region, the Mekong region, and in the Caribbean. And of course, very different context, a lot of water in those areas. But there are three things that I really noticed just in terms of governance, right, of water. Yes, there's a lot of water, but the access, the availability, the cost of water, the transmission, the treatment of water, and it cannot be a cookie cutter approach, right? Because you're working sometimes with indigenous communities, rural communities, high-end commercial enterprises, golf courses. So there's a very high demand for water and different types of water. So governance is really an issue, and unaccounted for water is a major issue. The second point was just, and you mentioned it, Mary, in your opening remarks, quality of water. So unfortunately, in a lot of these regions, while there is excessive quantity, the quality is not the best. We've got mining, we've got logging, we've got bauxite industries, we've got agricultural enterprises, we've got cattle walking through rivers. Water quality is a major issue. And the third thing is on climate adaptation in all of these countries, because not only are there projections for increased rainfall in some areas, but for longer and dry spells. And just coming back to that point that Adnan made on the thread for the 3 cups, water is important for climate, not just in adaptation, but in mitigation. Coming back to your point, Mary, on the very energy intensive desal process. Over.
Great, thank you. Mohamed, we've got 1 minute, because Martin's being very fierce with the timekeeping.
I fully agree. I mean, with the colleagues in Yemen about IWRM, and I thank you, Mary, for raising these issues about IWRM. I've been working in this business for the last 20 years, and unfortunately, there was not much success in this respect. We have to admit that globally. Water governance, IWRM, didn't achieve, what it was supposed to achieve over 20 years of promoting these techniques. And now shifting my focus from demand side management to supply side management. I believe now that the solution is going to be in supply management. And desalination, I have good news, for you. Now the EU is putting
Great. Thank you so much. And I think this kind of comes back. I'm going to be sure to leave a minute or two, a few minutes for Penny, but I just want to wrap up by saying, you know, we often say if climate is the problem, nature's the solution. And when you look at water, water is going to be key to everything, and being able to do that, to learn from one another, to, you know, get outside of boxes that say IWM has to be done like it is in Europe, which doesn't work necessarily in other countries, but learning, emphasizing the South-South learning, emphasize sharing knowledge, sharing exchanges, really helping everyone pull together so that we leave no one behind. And I want to thank the panelists so much for being here. You all, I know this is just the beginning, actually the middle, and definitely not the ending of the conversation on water. And thanks to everybody who's put questions in. I look forward to being in touch with everyone. And Penny, before Martin cuts my microphone off, I'm turning it over to you. Thanks so much, Penny.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Penny Stock, and I have the responsibility globally for driving forward our Nature Pledge. So I just would like, first of all, to thank you very, very much for your active participation today, and also warmly appreciate Midori, Adnan, Mary for setting the scene. And special thanks, of course, to our great panelists who've really shared their exemplary work and encouraged us to integrate nature for water security, or water as a core element of our policy and programmatic work wherever we work, you know, at the global, regional and national levels. So I just want to very quickly share with you what's coming up in terms of Nature Pledge activation. And of course, there'll be more of these dialogues coming. We've already had food, but we've got on the 11th of July, Nature for Gender Equality, and that will be followed quite quickly by Nature for Climate and also Digital for Nature. And we've got plans for peace, prosperity, youth, and disaster risk reduction. So looking at how nature is integrated in all of those key themes of UNDP's development narrative. And as I said, or as Mary has indicated, you know, Nature for Water Security has its own development action kit, and we'll have similar for all those different themes too. And these kits basically are designed to connect facts and figures with action on the ground. And we're also planning a Nature for Development overarching publication, which we'll publish at the COPs. All of this can be found on the portal, the Nature portal. Martin, if you could put the link in the chat. It's a one-stop shop for our corporate work on nature. So please do visit and make use of all the resources that are there. And apart from the dialogues, we're also working at the global, regional and country office levels with other bureaus and hubs and units to develop more products and guidance. We've got shift guidance coming, so looking at what it means to implement the value shift, the economic and finance shift, and that policy and practice shift, unpacking our strategic actions so that we help you to implement the pledge. We've got the regional activation plans under development. And as part of those, we've got pilot countries who will hopefully be able to show how we're embedding the Nature Pledge across CPDs, across our portfolios generally, putting nature at the heart of all the work that we do on the ground. So that's very quickly an update. I know we're out of time, but before I close the session, perhaps just a quick additional thought on what more we need to do to activate the pledge, regional dialogues, more guidance. Please answer our brief survey, which I think Martin's now going to share with you, or if you prefer, you can always write directly to Martin and myself by email. I mean, clearly what we want to do is provide you with the tools, with the knowledge, with the people that can support Nature for Development. Thank you very much. Over to you, Martin.
And no worries about the time. We went just 2 minutes over, and
I went as quickly as I could.
we managed to cover a lot. So I think it's time for us to open our cameras for those who can, say goodbye, and please answer the survey that will appear in your screens as soon as we end the call. Thank you for these colleagues. Thank you for the effort. Midori, Adnan, Mary, panelists, Margaret, Asim, Mohamed, please, my deepest appreciation. And the conversation continues. Have a good day, good evening, and see you soon on 11 July for Nature and Gender Equality. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Martin. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
you.
Thank you so much.